Or if it's afternoon when you're listening, good afternoon. Welcome to this midweek message. Anne and I passed another wedding anniversary last week. It wasn't a special one. Let's just say it was nearer 60 than 50. The recent death of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, has focused attention on his marriage to the Queen, and now the effect on her of being left a widow. This was a marriage underpinned by the Christian understanding of marriage, which is set before all those who marry in church. Genesis suggests that this was part of God's plan in creation. My recent Bible readings from the book of Job and what his friends had to say seems not to have connected at all with his situation. And I think now that much of what I was taught about Christian marriage when I was growing up misses the mark as we face the realities of 21st century society. It was reported in the press recently that there was concern that the church, in its desire to promote Christian marriage, overlooks single people. Are we, as churches, inclusive, welcoming singles as well as families, and sensitive to their needs, feelings, and circumstances? I'm conscious that much has changed in my lifetime. My parents and Anne's parents each had an unmarried sister. No doubt one factor was the loss of men in World War I. One of my aunts was my godmother and took an interest as I grew up and was confirmed. And this is one way that we can support marriages and family life. What has also changed is the balance between public and private roles. When my mother got married in 1938, she resigned her office job, as was quite usual then, and it was not very long before I was born. Today, many women have their own careers, which they continue after marriage. This does, of course, create complications when it involves moving to a new locality. I had two bosses who moved from Yorkshire to Surrey, whose marriages came unstuck. I don't know, of course, how far their marriages were in trouble already, or whether the move was a contributing factor. In the interests of equality, such considerations can no longer be taken into account by those making appointments. I mentioned earlier public and private, but perhaps I prefer the word personal. Private, despite various rules, such as the ones about data protection, is not absolute, as for example when there are instances of domestic abuse and what takes place behind doors is brought out into the light. And when the Duke of Sussex spoke of a private ceremony that had taken place before the wedding, the Archbishop had to point out that the valid and only wedding was the one that took place before witnesses. Marriages should be in the public domain. I'm reminded that Abraham twice pretends that Sarah is not his wife. Let me just introduce you briefly to the story. First of all, in Egypt. There was a famine in Canaan. It was so bad that Abraham went further south to Egypt to live there for a while. When he was about to cross the border into Egypt, he said to his wife Sarah, "You're a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you there, you'll assume that you're my wife, and so they will kill me and let you live. Tell them you are my sister. Then, because of you, they will let me live and treat me well." When he crossed the border into Egypt, the Egyptians did see that his wife was beautiful. Some of the court officials saw her and told the king how beautiful she was, so she was taken to his palace. Because of her, the king treated Abraham well and gave him flocks of sheep and goat, cattle, donkeys, slaves and camels. But because the king had taken Sarai, the Lord sent terrible diseases on him and on the people of his palace. Then the king sent for Abraham and asked him, "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she was your sister? And let me take her as my wife? Here is your wife, take her and get out." But we turn on to chapter 20, some years later. Abraham moved. Later, while he was living in Gerar, he said that his wife Sarah was his sister. So King Abimelech had Sarah brought to him. One night God appeared to him in a dream and said, "You are going to die because you have taken this woman. She's already married." But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, I am innocent. Would you destroy me and my people? Abraham himself said she was his sister, and she said the same thing. I did this with a clear conscience, and I have done no wrong." God replied in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did it with a clear conscience. So I kept you from sinning against me, and did not let you touch her. But now give the woman back to her husband." Next morning, of course, Abraham is summoned to explain himself. "She really is my sister. She's the daughter of my father, but not of my mother, and I married her." But the marriage was the key relationship. It's some 30 years now since my daughter got married, and I can't remember exactly what I said as father of the bride, but I do remember that I had 3 S's to make my points: space, support and sharing. Space, to give them the time to settle down, to make the necessary adjustments, but not to leave them to it completely unsupported, but maybe there in the background to offer help and to encourage as required. I've already mentioned the role of godparenting. And sharing, a reminder that they now belong to 2 families, and any children will have 2 sets of grandparents, neither of whom should have the monopoly. We of course saw this in relation to the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, where there were members of the Mountbatten family present. Where does faith fit in? The modern mindset suggests that faith belongs in the private sphere. Yes, our relationship with God as Father, Son and Holy Spirit is personal, but like our marriage status, it's part of who we are. I recall Michael Adey, when he was Bishop of Guildford, commenting that when he visited churches, he would often be introduced to people. "This is so-and-so, one of our sidesmen." But they wouldn't mention that the person had a significant day job. So may I encourage you to be your authentic Christian self, in church, at work, in the community and at home, or when spending time on your own. Paul reminds the churches to whom he writes that God equips us with a variety of gifts, which we are invited to use for the common good. We may do this through the church activities directly, or as part of a wider community initiative, like helping at the local food bank. And if you are in work, you are called to be salt and light there. And all of us have to plan our time to include work, family, church, hobbies, and so on. I pray that we may be authentically, if not explicitly, Christian in all we do.